And I am very thrilled, along with Shelby Mastovich, who's on our team, to present another one of our Chief Marketing Officer series. And today we have Carol Carpenter. I'll introduce her in a minute. I'm very thrilled that we're continuing these series. We have lots of opportunities to sort of connect with the world. And this is another example of that kind of connection, because Carol, as we hear from her, she is not located in Pittsburgh, but she has taken the time out of her schedule to have a conversation with us. The sole purpose of us doing this kind of work in terms of CMO is to just make sure that we have a forum where other people who are actually in the field can understand what are some of the best practices, listen to a perspective from someone who's leading an organization in terms of marketing, what some of the trends have been, and ways for us to collaborate across our own ecosystem in Southwestern Pennsylvania. So we have a very special guest today. That is Carol Carpenter. I mentioned she is at VMware. She's at the helm of the Chief Marketing Officer, and she joined in 2020. Good grief, but she joined in 2020. So I can't wait to sort of understand that in June, which is even more impressive. And she's responsible for leading all of the aspects of the global marketing organization for VMware. So that includes brand, that includes demand generation, partnership, and field marketing. And I'm sure there's more. I'm sure there's analytics and other things that she has to oversee. She brings to the role more than 25 years of tech experience, which is great. She was at marketing of Google Cloud, right? And so she's got a great background there. She built a team, she crafted the brand positioning and campaign, the playbooks, enabled sales. She shifted the go-to-market approach from products to solutions, driving Google Cloud from an early stage player into the cloud market, that the leader that they are now, which is really impressive. So I'm sure that journey was amazing. And prior to Google Cloud, she was the CEO of a company called ElasticBox that was acquired by CenturyLink. So that means she's an entrepreneur, and she's held leadership and marketing roles in tech at Trend Micro, Keynote Systems, Apple, and more. So she calls herself a geek, right? A self-professed geek. And she has a passion for tech and a passion for solving customer problems. She loves building and scaling new products, as you just heard from what I shared. And she's proud of the teams that she's formed and across every place that she's worked. And the fact that many of her former team members are also doing impactful work across tech, which is always way cool when you get to see the people that you lead and then they go off and they're doing amazing things. So she has a strong commitment to mentoring women and students via the HBS, the Harvard Business School's Women Entrepreneurship Program, the Stanford Alumni Network, and Monte Jade. She has a Bachelor's of Arts in Economics from Stanford and an MBA from Harvard Business School. Wow. Okay, doesn't that sound great, Carol? That's really impressive.
I'm like, who is that person?
I know, I'd like to meet that person, and guess what? We are going to meet her right now because she is with us. So I am going to pass the baton. Thank you for taking the time for us here in Pittsburgh. We are recording this. We're going to make sure that we're sharing it. Sometimes it's goofy in the middle of an afternoon, 2 o'clock, just so you know, the sun is shining here brightly. Okay. So that changes how people think in the course of their day after we've gone through some dreary grayness over the last few days. So I'm passing the baton to Carol. Thank you so much for taking the time with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Audrey. Wow, thank you. You went through everything. I'm so delighted to be here. When Shelby reached out to me about speaking, I was really honored. And really, more importantly than that is I grew up in West Virginia in a small town called Fairmont, which is near Morgantown, where WVU is. And yes, and our hometown, hometown airport, museum, every field trip is Pittsburgh. So I have a real soft spot for I call it the tri-state area, mid-Atlantic state.
We consider Fairmont and Morgantown as just suburbia.
Yeah. Well, I still remember one of my best friends growing up, her father every day commuted to work in a plant outside of Pittsburgh every day. And it's such a weird thing because growing up, I thought a 15-minute drive it was an hour and a half to Pittsburgh, well, maybe less depending on how you drive.
Right.
I thought, wow, that's so far. And now I live in California, and
Oh my
frankly,
God.
like an hour and a half is a daily drive for everybody, when we pre-pandemic. Anyway, just shows you it's all relative, right?
So
But anyway,
do you have family here? Can we count on you coming
my
back
father, my parents, my father just passed recently. So, yeah, but lots of really good friends. My oldest brother went to WVU. My other brother went to University of Pittsburgh. So we have lots of family and friends, and go Steelers. I'm still a diehard Steeler fan. So yeah.
That wasn't even planned. That's awesome.
I know. So I don't want to spend the whole time talking about that, but that is why I have such an affinity for the area. And I try to get back at least once, if not more, a year, but with the pandemic.
Well, when you come back, whenever you come back, you have to let us know, because we will definitely do something fun.
Oh, yeah. I mean, gosh, and Pittsburgh has changed from when I was a kid. So much. I mean, that whole Three Rivers area is beautiful. Anyway. So I feel really fortunate to be here. I'm going to try to share some stories about what I've learned in my trials and tribulations, and hopefully it helps some of you all and helps you progress your career. Okay, I have a few slides. So we talked about this. That's my family, the big hair. I love that. That's my mom and dad, my brothers. Love, my parents were immigrants from mainland China. My grandparents are down there on the left. I'm fortunate. I have two amazing children, adult children now, and that's my husband, and I'm the shrimp of the family. My father was my idol growing up, just for a lot of reasons. He was a college professor. That's how we ended up in Fairmont, West Virginia. And he was just a really generous, gracious man. And I think a lot of who I am is really because of his role modeling. And interestingly enough, because we were a traditional Asian family, and this happens in a lot of cultures, not so much anymore, but when I was growing up, it was very much, the emphasis was, what are the boys doing, not what the girls. So actually, ironically, I didn't have that much pressure. You would think, yeah, tiger parents. No, actually, it was all about my brothers, and they had to be doctors, and they, I could do whatever I wanted, and they still don't. My parents, frankly, don't. But they're still kind of confused. When you work in technology, it's sometimes hard to convey exactly what we do. And then I was fortunate enough, I did go to Stanford undergrad, and it changed my life in lots of ways. I met my husband there, and I met a lot of people who later helped me in life. And I think that's something I underestimated early on, which is how much your network can help and change your career trajectory. And so I've done a variety of things, from small company to big company, big brand names, companies you've never heard of. And I got to tell you, I didn't plan my career. A lot of my career trajectory is I have followed people. I went to Trend Micro, which is a security software company, because it was a female CEO who I was very much enamored with, and who I just wanted an opportunity to see a female CEO in action. So along the way, I've learned a few things, and this is what I wanted to just share a little bit of, not so much like where I've been, but what I learned. And so, for me, going from Fairmont to Stanford, I have to say, I did suffer from imposter syndrome. People talked about prep school. I'd never heard of one. People talked about something called AP, which everybody today knows about, but I'd never heard of. I'd never taken any AP class. So I felt like, gosh, what am I doing here? Yeah, I did well in high school, but I didn't perform at the same level. So it took a while, but I think that's a lot of growing up, is figuring out how to manage our voices in our head that tell us we're not good enough, or we're not smart enough, or we're not really capable. And you realize over time, like, what? Everybody has that. It's a first time for everyone. Everyone has to be that first time manager, first time VP, first time parent, first time. So it's a very human condition. I think I realized it in my mid 30s. I still remember I was at Trend Micro, and I was a general manager, and this is what I call my me to we moment, where, up into a certain point in your career, it's all about yourself, how you're doing. Gosh, I want to be the star. And then it's when you have a bigger team, it's like, no, it doesn't really matter what I do. It's much more about the team. And I had children at that time, and I've always worked. I pretty much always worked as my kids were growing up. And I just realized, like, I'm never going to be that person who's going to work 24 hours. Just is not possible. I need to be home by 5, let the nanny go, etc. And I realized that for me, it was about 2 things: people and process. I needed to hire the very best people, and I needed to focus on establishing the process that for how decisions would get made, for how the behavior should be set up, not so much I can't be the decision maker. So I think that's a really important moment. And hopefully you all have gone through that. I didn't hit that until my mid-30s. I always hope that people can get there before I do. And then another seminal moment for me is I took a CEO role at ElasticBox, which was this DevOps-oriented company. At our height, we were 50 people. And looking back, I'm like, wow, that was a big risk. I was uncomfortably excited. And part of the reason I did that is I had breakfast with Reid Hoffman, who is the founder of LinkedIn. I went to Stanford with him, and we're not close, but we were definitely closer back then. And I had breakfast with him, and we were talking about careers and what we were doing. And he was at LinkedIn growing that business to the success that it now is. And he asked me a really hard question. He said, how are you contributing? And he didn't mean just professionally. He meant it also personally. And on the professional front, his point to me was, look, you're living in Silicon Valley. You're living in Pittsburgh, which is huge tech boom, right? And we're all just fortunate to live in this 21st century where the pace of change is incredibly fast, and the opportunity to innovate is what you can dream can be a reality. And he said, gosh, you're living in this really important time, and why aren't you contributing more? And he was the impetus for me to take that CEO role, because a lot of it was just in my own head. Like, why would I be a CEO? I've never been a CEO. And another friend of mine said, hey, you should tell the next 6 recruiters who call you for marketing roles that you want to be a CEO and see what happens. And it was that moment, like, no, I can't do that. And my friend was really practical. He said, look, how long do you have, financially? How many months can you go without a job? Whatever it is, 6 months, a year, whatever. Just set a time frame. I'm going to say this to every recruiter for the next X months and see what happens. Shocking. I said it to the first 3 people. Nobody questioned. Oh, you're not, why are you? No one questioned whether I was capable. It was all, oh, let me tell you about the CEO searches we're working on. So that's all it took. And I think I will tell you, because people have said to me, well, don't you want to be a CEO again? Have you thought about it? I might if the right thing came along. But frankly, what I learned during that experience is that the weight of and being responsible for all the people in the company, albeit small, and their families, that is the most stress and pressure I have ever felt in any job in my entire career. And for me, it's a level that I think you have to be in the right mindset to want to take on. I never say never, but you definitely have to be in that mindset. And then, Google, a lot of that was about scaling. They just announced results, which I'm really, really proud to see what they've done. They hit a $13 billion run rate. When I joined, gosh, now 4.5 years ago, whenever it was, we were like at 0. So really, really happy to see that continue to scale. And now I'm leading a company, and just a real quick commercial. What we do, VMware is a technology software company that's really designed to help companies deliver better outcomes, better digital business outcomes for their customers' employees. And the challenge of what got me so excited and why I came here is that the company is going through a transition. And I talk to my team a lot about, are you a good jockey or are you on a good horse? And hopefully we're all fortunate in our careers to be on some good horses, and I certainly have. Can I fully take credit? I mean, for where Google is today? Certainly not. Like the geniuses who came up with this ad model in the early days that continues to generate cash, like an amazing cash machine. I wasn't the jockey on the horse then, right? So it's something I think really hard about is, what are you contributing? Comes back to that question that Reed pushed me on. And what is your superpower and how are you contributing? And I took this VMware role because I love the spaces that we play in. It's a combination of cloud, a combination of application development and helping developers get code pushed to the cloud faster, and also anywhere workspaces, which in this pandemic, how do you enable your employees to work remotely in a secure, distributed fashion? So it's a lot of the problems that I think are hugely pervasive. And I think, there's always a part of me that wants to show like I can be a good jockey. And so my challenge here is, how do we transition our business? How do we transition a marketing organization that historically has been very good at the on-premise license piece? And we are transitioning to be a SaaS and subscription business, and changing that business model as well as the customer relationship. It's not about selling software and then talking to them 3 years later. Now it's about, how do you develop that relationship? And I've had some experiences there that I think, are pretty useful. So I'm 7 months in. I've been working with really smart people, and it's pretty exciting. So if you're looking for a job, ping me, because we're always looking for great talent. So one of my big challenges, and I'll just touch on this briefly, is we all went digital last year. It was good and bad, right? Like, how do you take a marketing organization, especially if you're in B2B enterprise selling and marketing, where there's always some combination of what I call the high touch events and high touch activities combined with your low touch automated scaled touches. And that's what a lot of B2B marketing is. And you have to figure out what's that mix. And in particular, I think for a lot of enterprise companies, when you ask them, what are you really selling? Most people will give you their functional answer. I'm selling software. Even when I describe VMware, I started to talk about what we do functionally. But what are you really selling? You're selling a combination of, functional, emotional, and economic value. And what I talk about with what we're selling is primarily speed and confidence. How do you do that in a virtual world? How do you convey speed and confidence that your company, if you undertake and buy our products, this could apply to a lot of your products, that it's going to enable you to go faster, and that you're going to have the confidence that you made the right architectural decisions for the next decade? Those are big decisions. And how do you convey that in a virtual world? It's hard. We're over Zoom or whatever, your platform is. So we had to do a whole rethink of how we do this. And obviously data is, I tell my team, we need to eat data for breakfast. Like, marketing needs to be data driven. So there are a lot of behavioral changes. And I just point out, VMworld is one of these iconic shows. When I was at Google Cloud, we used to look at, what is VMware doing? And we took a lot of best practices, because VMworld's been around, 20 years as an event. And it's known as a big industry conference for technology and IT. So we took what's typically a 30,000 person event, and we turned it into an almost 200,000 person virtual event in 4 months. And I'm really proud of what the team has done. Really incredible innovation and creativity, which is a lot of what's needed in this new world. How do you drive engagement? We had record-breaking attendance. And what's interesting is new people were able to attend. So obviously a big benefit of being virtual, you get to reach out, you get to include a much broader swath. VMworld, historically, you had to pay. So by making it free, we were able to reach more developers, more DevOps, more operators who historically could not attend. So that was a big part of this whole challenge. And I'll just make a few comments here on what I've learned about onboarding and leading a team through transition in an online world. Okay, one, and I'm sure you're all doing this, you cannot over communicate. Like the more you communicate, the better. And we've been experimenting, I'm sure you have too, everything from the video call to, hey, let's take a break. Let's just do a phone call and walk up and down our streets while we're talking. We've started a series, it's called Coffee with Carol. It could be coffee with, Audrey. Once a week, the first 20 people who sign up, and it's around the world. So it's more like cocktails with Carol at some point, but it's an hour and it's on no slides, unstructured, and people can just share. The third thing I recommend, and I'm sure you do it as well, this is, not anything innovative that we came up with, but taking the time. You jump on these Zoom calls and there's a time limit. It's easy to just jump in and start into the transactional parts of your job. It's taking those few minutes to say, hey, what's going on in Pittsburgh? How are the storms? How's your health? Really important. And the fourth thing I wasn't planning to talk about, but I will talk about this because it just came up recently, is I have had several members who have been impacted by COVID. You probably have too, as we see more people getting sick. Thankfully, not as many dying, but more people getting sick. It's affecting more and more people. So that's something we try to talk about openly. We try to talk about, hey, I had to get a test the other day, and share, because you don't know. You get on this call and you have no idea what people are going through. So we're trying to be as transparent as possible. And I'm sure you are too, but I would just encourage that. The other thing I would say, and this is in particular for joining a new company during a pandemic, everyone tells you, hey, in your first 90 days, figure out the shadow org. And by that, it's not necessarily, the underworld, but how do decisions get made? So you get the physical org chart, which is the stated positional power chart. But when you can't be in the same room, you know what it's like in the old days. In the old days, you go into a conference room, and yes, there's maybe somebody with a title who is running the meeting or the decision maker, but you can watch the room and you can see who do people look to for validation and reinforcement. You can't see it as easily on Zoom. So you've got to make some allies who can help you understand the shadow org. So that's what I would say about this time and period, which is so unique. I talked about the jockey and horse a little bit. Just the other pieces of this is being able to say when you don't know. Like, these are just Carol's pithy things I say to my team. Like, when I went to Apple right out of school, I was a product manager for Mac, the Apple Macs, right? I was not an engineer by training. So learning what is RAM, what is a CPU, what is Ethernet, like the steep learning curve, and being able to say, I don't know, and asking for help is really important. The other thing I tell my team, that as you rise in an org, the best advice I got when I took on that CEO role, I did something somebody else told me, and I hope you have mentors, get some great mentors in your life. They help you at different times in different places. But the best advice I got was build your kitchen cabinet. They're not your board members. They are not your friends, because your friends will get tired of hearing about all your problems. They are, a few people who know you well enough, but aren't your friends, but know you well enough, who have some domain knowledge, either in your function or your business area, your industry. And ask them to be part of your kitchen cabinet. And now, why would they say yes? Well, this is all about, just like when you ask a mentor, there has to be some give and get. That you're going to buy them dinner, you're going to give them knowledge about what your startup space is doing, or what your current business is doing, or the latest best practices in marketing, or there has to be that give and get. But anyway, this kitchen cabinet, they were all first-time CEOs, because I was a first-time CEO. And one of them said, when you're an operator, you always start with yes. Yes, and let me think about that. Yes, and let me figure that out. When you're the CEO or you're a leader of many people, you have to start with no. And it's a really hard thing to do if you grew up in companies that were more collaborative and, you want to try to, help people, and especially if you're in a role in marketing or any other team that spans an org. So the starting with no is hard to do, but super important. And it's a skill. It is a skill to say, I don't think that's such a good idea. And to push back and pressure test because people ask you for so many things all day long. We don't have enough resources. We don't have enough people. We don't have enough budget, blah, blah, blah. So starting with no, it forces more critical thinking on your team's part. Okay. So that's it for the prepared talk. I can talk at length about all of these things. I know we have a lot of time. I wanted to make sure that we had time to speak and to take questions. Audrey, Shelby, I don't know how you wanted to handle this. I think there were a few questions that came in earlier. I could talk to you a lot about organizational transformation, because that's what I'm going through right now. And what does that mean? I can also talk to you about SaaS marketing and how we want to change some of our data-driven demand gen. So if you want to go deep in that, I'm pretty open for how we want to talk, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview of what my life has been like. Okay, I'm seeing some, okay, I see something from Audrey, okay. But do I need to unmute you?
No.
Okay.
Oh, there you go,
Okay,
Audrey.
I'm unmuted now. Okay. So if I could just jump in. First of all, thank you so much for your candor and where you've been on your journey. I've been thinking about my own as you were talking through that. A lot of amazing pieces of wisdom and just authenticity. So thank you for that. And but it's so fascinating because so you're in this role, and here we are at the period of time where people had like 3-year plans on, deploying an accelerated digital strategy. And then, we get into the pandemic and people are pivoting within like 7 weeks or 8 weeks. Where are you in VMware in that space? I mean, you came in June, so there had to be some things that were going on before that. But as a leader of this piece of the operations, what are some changes that you're either seeing or planning or experiencing that have been so condensed in terms of marketing?
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about, so 2 things. One, the digital transformation, if you will, and tied to that, the data-driven nature, and I'll double click on that in a moment. And then the second part is I think this is such a golden age of creativity for marketers and for business people. And I'll give you a few examples of what we've done there. So on the data front, how many of you work for companies that have been around more than 3 years? Okay, unless you're at a brand new company that's starting from scratch, all of us have what I call data headaches, right? Where data is siloed, or, the web data is over here, our demand gen data is over here in Marketo, or in our case, we've also acquired several companies. So they're not even on the same instance. Our tech stack is just really diverse. So the first thing we've been doing, and look, this was already underway, but we accelerated it, is the integration of all the data stacks. Because literally, when I got there, the first question is, well, how are we doing? Show me a dashboard. There were hundreds of dashboards with everyone having a different definition of what is marketing influence pipeline, what is marketing sourced pipeline, what is the ROI of our spend. I mean, you're all shaking your heads like, okay, basic questions, okay, that every CMO, every business should be able to answer. Like, how do you decide how to spend your money? Where, if you had an extra dollar, where would you put it? We could answer that at a directional level. It was not integrated. And that's kind of the biggest piece, is like, how do you integrate your data, make more integrated decisions, and then drive an integrated marketing plan at scale, by the way. So again, easy to do, much easier to do if you're a smaller company, or if you're just starting out and you're creating all these data silos yourself from the get-go. Harder to do when there's a lot of it. And by the way, Google, we had the same challenge. Google's a 20-year plus company as well. Like any company that's been around for any period of time has this challenge. It's not necessarily unique, but it's painful because you have to go slow to go fast. And most people, they want to see the results. They want to, hey, what are you doing? Where are my leads? Hang on, those leads aren't worth anything if we don't have a process and a system, and we're not actually measuring the end result, because then we could spend more money, but it would be, spending more money blindly. Okay, the second part about creativity. When I say golden age, we always talk about B2B should be H to H, human to human. B2B marketing is really human to human. And how do we create this human touch? So not just in our relationships and our teams, but with prospects and customers. And so this is where, lots of creative ideas. And by the way, we sourced them from other companies, right? I called up other CMO friends, like, how are you doing your exec councils? How are you doing your technical advisory boards? How are you thinking about your account-based marketing, ABM programs that used to be very high touch, white glove events? How are you thinking about it? And, I'm sure you've participated and, executed everything from the virtual wine tasting to the, putting with a pro. Come and, get out your golf clubs and putt with a pro over video. I mean, it's pretty amazing. I've been really delighted by some of the creativity, how do you do a painting class with your prospect? Obviously you got to segment your customer base for the right kinds of activities. Cooking classes online with your prospects and customers to, one of my favorites was this chocolate tasting that I thought, oh, really? Chocolate tasting? Like, okay. But it was led by this little boutique chocolatier who ended up giving a tour through his chocolate factory and then telling these stories that kept everyone. It was by and far one of the, I think, most engaging, and customers told us they thought it was engaging. Those are examples. That's more on the ABM side, on the high touch side. But the creativity on, you all are doing it here with this event. How do you get beyond the Zoom? How do you create engagement? Like, how do you have breakout spaces?
Right.
Let's face it, the tech is the experience, right?
So how did you, in the middle of June, come on board, and then through this transformation period, how did you get everyone aligned in terms of the new marketing priorities?
So, I think we are 70% there. Like I still have some people to work on. Anytime you're going through a transformation, this is a very broad way of putting it. A third of the people are going to say, awesome, Audrey, I'm on your bus, let's go. A third are going to sit on the fence and say, that's interesting, sounds good, but let me wait and see. Is this really where we're going to head? And do I believe in it? And then you have a third, and I call them the naysayers. And what you hope is like some will leave on their own,
right?
That you'll figure out who they are fast, because if you don't, they become poison in a transformation. And it's not always a third, maybe it's, 15%, but that's a group that you kind of need to move pretty quickly on. And when I say we're 70% there, I think we've done some of the move the naysayers on or convince them. And there's still a chunk of people who need to come on board. So how do you do it? I don't know any other way. You have to socialize with your leadership team, who have to socialize the changes down. And you know, like anything, it's much more about the why more than the what. Like, why are we changing?
Right.
Here's where we are today. Marketing is at the back of the bus when it comes to the business. We want to be the headlights of the business. We don't feel like we're strategic. How do we become a more strategic partner? Okay, bring your other complaints. Oh, we're under-resourced. Well, how can we become more resourced? We have to show the ROI. You know, and you go through this, and through the listening, which I'm sure, you know, we all do when you take a new role, you go through a listening tour, and hopefully you get 90 days. Sometimes it turns into 60 days because everybody's, in my case, it turned into like 30 days and I was asked to present an assessment and plan. But whatever time period you have, do your listening tour, listen, and use the data you collect to show everyone, like, look, here's the perception and here's your brand. By the way, I mean, that's something, somebody asked me this. So I joined my first board six plus years ago. And the question I was asked, it wasn't so much, one of the interview questions was, how would you characterize your archetype in an executive meeting? So it wasn't quite what is your brand, which is how I think about it as a marketer. Like, what is your brand? Do people think of you as the creative one or the devil's advocate in a meeting? But he was more asking, what is your archetype?
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's something I had not thought hard and long about, but coming into this role, I thought about it pretty hard. Ever since he asked this question of me 6.5 years ago.
What is it? What is your archetype?
My archetype is, I am an integrated business leader. So I eschew being called like, oh, she's just the marketer, or and that's why I do think, like, I've had general manager roles. I've run sales, which I recommend to everybody because it makes you a better marketer. You run sales, my goodness, you got a number on your back, and every week somebody is saying, what's your forecast? What's your commit? Where are you at? Makes you realize, like, what kinds of marketing really move the needle versus are nice to have. I am not going to be the most creative person in the room. I am not going to be the most data driven, but I'm a synthesizer. I can listen, I can bring the pieces together, I can integrate it into a business strategy that's interpreted for my team. I think it's, you know, really important to know that. And, you know, so I came in purposefully thinking about that, and when you come into a new role and you're a new person, you get that fresh chance to be whatever you want to be. It's like my son went to college 2 years ago, and I said, who are you going to show up as? Now, it's got to be authentic. It's not like show up and, you know, you're somebody you're not. Like, and he's like, because of course, you know, at age 18, I'm going to be the popular kid. I'm like, well, that's not really, you don't aspire to that. I mean, you could become popular, but like, who are you and how do you want to show up? You know, high in tech. Anyway, it's another whole discussion. And of course, you want to show up with all those values, but, you know, it's got to be that snappy, pithy, like, what do you want people to think of you as? So yeah. Go ahead.
Go on, keep going.
No, so I came in knowing that to be that person, I needed to have strong ties with not just the other parts of marketing or the usual stakeholders, sales, product management, but with parts of the executive team that I had not spent a lot of time with naturally. The CFO, the chief CRHO, the chief people officer, like, that is really important if you, in my case, really want to be seen as this integrated business leader.
So what do you think is ahead over the next, I don't know, 6 months for VMware in terms of your view? Are we going to see some changes, like in terms of marketing, et cetera, in the work that you've done? I mean, you're always known for your annual conference and convening and we heard early on, but what are we going to see different, do you think?
Yeah, so I think from the outside, and you bring up a really good point, Audrey, which is something I talked to my team about. We have an opportunity because we are in marketing, but I think this applies to anyone. People don't remember PowerPoint slides. They don't remember Google slides. They don't remember, I wrote a 5-page plan, circulated to the exec. Nobody remembers. And go to any website. What do you really remember? People barely read anymore. They just look at the headlines, the bolded subtitles, and you can't get your message across. So I encourage my team to think about, what are 1 or 2 things we are going to do symbolically to show the market and employees that we are not the same VMware that we were a year ago. And I just have to tell this quick story, so when I went into ElasticBox, it was a turnaround. And a friend of mine was part of YPO, Young Professionals Organization. And she called me up. She goes, oh, you're doing this turnaround. And I was invited to breakfast with Meg Whitman at HP. And I'm like, well, okay, Meg Whitman's running this multi-billion-dollar business. I'm at this little piddly startup. We're in different worlds. She goes, no, you should go because she's doing a turnaround. I'm like, yeah, but hers is like this huge, aircraft carrier. And mine is like, she's like, no, you should go. Anyway, so I signed up and, typical, I don't know if this happens in Pittsburgh, but California, I call it the flaky state. I think 60 people signed up and only 15 people showed up, including my friend who bailed the night before. So I'm like, oh, what the heck, I'm going to go. Anyway, yeah, classic. So I go, and it turns out there are only 15 of us having this discussion. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. We get to ask some really brutal questions.
Right.
And it ranged from what has she done? And the one thing she said, and I know, for all the young people, you're like, who's Meg Whitman? She's not even relevant anymore. But I will tell you, she's hugely relevant. She was a brilliant businesswoman at eBay, and she still is, and she did eBay. And then, anyway, she said she takes a day out of every month to think, and she's very left brain, by the way. She's a very left brain, analytical thinker. But she said when she ran for office, she ran for governor of California, spent like $100 million of her own money and lost to, anyway. And somebody asked her, what did you learn from that? And she said, I learned symbolism matters more than anything else, at least in politics. And we certainly have all learned that in this past, several years. And anyway, so she said, what I decided when I became CEO of Hewlett Packard is that I was going to take a day every month she called it her think day or something like that. And she was going to think about, how can I symbolically communicate the big priorities? And so anyway, she tells this great story, and I'm going to tell it to you because it still gives me chills. And I applied this when I went to ElasticBox, and I'm applying it here. She said, look, I was trying to tell everybody, because we had to cut costs, like, spend HP's money like it's your own. Okay, how many leaders say that? It would be like me saying, hey, I want VMware to be known for its cloud offerings. How many companies are saying that today? I want to be known as a cloud leader. Okay, jump on the bandwagon. Everybody's saying that. So I guess they had their annual, they bring together their top VPs around the world. It was in Atlanta or someplace like that. And she said it was at a low cost hotel like the Westin or something. I was like, okay, most of us don't think it's low cost, but that's okay. And she said the night before it started, she sat down with her EA and she looked at a list of everybody who had checked in and who had not. Next day, welcome everybody, rah, so great to see you. And then she said, it's come to my attention that about 10 of you have chosen to disregard my guidelines around treating HP's money like it's your own.
Right.
At the next break, you can go back to your hotel, get your things, and do not return.
Right. I love that. I think I've heard this story.
Okay. The whole room erupted. And she said that was more powerful than like having audits of people's expense reports. I mean, this is 100,000 people. You know, this was more powerful. And when she traveled the world, the story traveled faster than she could have done anything. So that has stuck with me. So then I went to ElasticBox and okay, I go back to my day job. I'm at this little startup. There's all this angst because there were all these challenges prior to my joining. And I got to tell you, everybody was whinging and complaining and going on and on. And I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We are going to get a box, and my kids helped me make this box. And we made a big sign. It said ElasticBox 1.0. I gave everybody Post-it notes, and I said, you're going to write down all the things that were wrong with ElasticBox 1.0. And then we are going to throw it all in this box. We are going to take it on the fire escape, and we are going to burn this and have, you know, what is it called? Like a burning man party or whatever. You know, we're going to burn this in effigy. And then we are talking about ElasticBox 2.0 and the company we are going to be. And that's the kind of things when you ask me, and I don't want to share yet, but what we're doing with VMware and what you're going to see is as we are transitioning to be a SaaS and subscription company. And if you look at our last public results, you know, we were at 22% of our revenue is SaaS and subscription. We obviously want to accelerate that. I have a big perception change to make, which is everybody thinks of VM. I mean, it's good and bad. We've got a well-known brand, but it's a brand known for virtualization. Is it a brand known for application development? Is it a brand known for Kubernetes? Is it a brand known for containers? Is it a brand known for modern infrastructure? That's what we are changing that perception. So you're going to see what I call the tried and true things like advertising, some pretty creative campaigns, some pretty interesting announcements. We're going to have a new CEO, hopefully in the next few months. So I think there's going to be a lot of signals.
Great.
And then a few symbolic things that I'm going to just save because it would be interesting to come back in a year and have you tell me.
No, I think it's great. I think that you sharing that, particularly you being at the onset of the journey, you're still at the onset of the journey in terms of your work there. So you've got enough in your toolkit to say, okay, I'm going to do a couple of these things that are just going to be clear and demonstrative. And that's what we're going to do. And my gosh, my hat's off to you that you have the, not even just the wherewithal, obviously you have the aptitude, but that you have the autonomy to be able to drive that. And that also matters, right? Because you have to have that capability, and no one should be able to stand in your path to be able to craft that. So it depends on the organization. Sounds like they're ready. Sounds like they're ready for you.
Totally. And by the way, that is something that the pandemic has given, I think, everyone a little more elbow room to try more creative and out of the box things. And the other part is, you know, when you're in a company that is going through a transformation, you get that room. So I personally have always, it seems like I'm always attracted to these companies that need change, need to build, I mean, that's personally what I like to do.
That's probably what you need to include in your archetype. You need to say that you've got to be in it. You're not a maintainer.
No, and you know, it's like the jockey horse thing, or the other metaphor people use is, you know, are you a peacetime leader or are you a wartime leader?
Right. Well, I don't know what the pandemic is. You're a pandemic time leader, probably.
Yeah, I think we've all been stretched on that front, haven't we?
Right, haven't we?
Yeah. Like, how do you be a great pandemic leader? You know, it's interesting. I think again, these are all great opportunities to show that things don't have to be done the same way.
I absolutely. So how are we doing on time? I mean, like I could sit here and talk with Carol all afternoon. So I'm trying to be sensitive to her time. Shelby.
Yeah, we're still good on time. I mean, we loosely had it scheduled till about 3 o'clock.
Okay.
for this discussion, if that works for Carol. And then anyone that wants to stay on, we can do some networking if they'd like.
So does anyone have any other questions? Because I'm still asking questions, but you have a question here from Peter Shelley. Can you see it? Thanks for taking the time. How do you balance the big picture, 30,000-foot view on the ground that you also need to have? How do you manage the breadth of the role? And this is from Pete Shelley, who is working for a company called Expedient. And they manage big data centers and lots of stuff. So, and you also have something from Lauren. So I don't want to hijack it because you and I could have this conversation for a couple of hours. So let's start with Peter.
Okay. Thanks, Peter. How do you balance the big picture with the day-to-day? All right. This is what I was talking about earlier, people and process. Hire the very best people you can. Focus on the process. Like, I try really hard, and this is part of, empowering your leadership team and others around you to push them to make the recommendations. And when I ask questions, it's more like, tell me about the process by which you are going to make the decision. And then if I question anything, I question the inputs, the criteria, like that. I think that's really important. Now, that said, okay, I have learned some pretty hard lessons that you do need to trust and verify often. And particularly when you are new coming into an org and you are trying to figure out and assess the people around you, that you have to figure out like who is capable, because I'm not saying, a lot of times people are not capable because historically they haven't been empowered or they don't have the right tools or they don't have the right people, but who is capable of driving their own initiatives and KPIs and OKRs. So I have a few ways of testing that. One is I will throw out something broad, like hey, how are we going to symbolically convey that we're a different company? And let people go off and stew and see what people, and ask everybody, I want you to bring 2 ideas. Like, so you grant them permission and you also require them to come back. I mean, that's one way. And by the way, it's not that I'm looking for them to be creative. I want to see, how do they harness their team? So there's this initial, what I call people, team, process assessment. Okay. And that's part of that trust and verify. The other part is, in large companies, I don't know how big Expedient is. I think there's a real danger sometimes when executives become the aggregators and reporters of what their team is doing and not close enough to have strong opinions. And I have made that mistake too. Because, I want to empower everybody. I've got these great leaders. They're going to go off and do their thing. And then, yes, I'll represent it. Well, that works if there's really good process. But what I have discovered is you need to figure out, which most of us do, like, what are the 1 or 2 things that are really, really important? And figure out what is going to be your active role in that. And what I mean by that is, obviously when you're the leader, if you decide, hey, I really am going to be part of the demand gen pipeline scrubbing, and we're going to, because there's a whole process, it's broken, the BDR to SDR to inside sales to sales handoff. I want to be part of fixing the pipeline problems. Well, you're not really going to be in every single working meeting. So then deciding what part of that, where can you add value and what is your role? In the RACI, DACI, whatever model you use, being really clear with your team, I'm going to be part of this working team as another contributor. Or no, I'm going to be part of this working team as the decision maker, which I don't recommend unless you don't trust anybody on your team to be the decision maker. But anyway, just being really clear upfront about that and picking 1 or 2 things, and I don't consider this so much like what's your brand, but thinking a year out, what are the one or two things I want to land, need to land, that are going to have an impact on the business? And those are the one or two things you probably need to go a little deeper on. That's my point of view. Okay. Well, sorry about the long and winded answer.
You still
okay. H to H, as B2B buyers say, are quickly transforming. Yes. So yes, I mean, this is, what is the latest stat? You know, Forrester, it's been around. Forrester put it out there. 57 people make 57% of buyers have already made up their decision before they even talk to a salesperson. And I've seen that stat even higher than 57%. Look, everybody's a user. Everybody uses the internet to find information. Everybody wants to learn, try before they buy. I mean, just across the board. And when I say everyone, there's something really important. It's something we are having to retool a lot of our programs around. It's not just the buying center, it's all the users who need to be on board, right? Because even if the buyer buys, then if no one actually implements, you're going to end up with a very high churn rate and not a great retention rate. So we have done a few things. One is your website, you know, it's your front door. It's not just, it has got, and we're going through a major update of our website, but not so much, it is the look and feel, but the frictionless, how do they find information, putting yourself in their shoes. I'll give you a really, really quick example. We are in process of changing our nav, and I don't think this is a secret because we're going to change our navigation. Everybody changes, but we did a lot of testing, and what we discovered is part of the reason people don't realize that VMware does all these other things around application modernization and security, and is because you come to the website and we have pretty general business value messages. And across the top in the nav, it says solutions, products, and you have to do, you have to hover over, pull down, and then you see all these solutions, all these products, all these industries. And I mean, this is no secret. We did some testing. We're like, well, this is really silly. Why don't we just make our nav say what we do? Why does it have to be 2 or 3 clicks? If you're a developer, can't you just get to that faster? If you're an operator, can't you get to it faster? So anyway, that was one of the big things. Like the nav is actually going to say, instead of generic products, solutions, it's now going to say application modernization, cloud transformation. I probably don't have the words exactly right. My team knows exactly what it is, but that's just a simple example of improving that channel. And then when you say, what are the other channels we're prioritizing? I mean, all the social digital channels, which have come of age. I mean, everybody's on LinkedIn, not everybody's on Twitter. But those tools as both inbound and outbound, super critical. And so if you look at our budget, I'd say 2 years ago to now, and how we've shifted from some of those traditional ways of touching customers, which were more in person, steak dinner, et cetera, to what we're doing digitally, I think we have a much better balance.
You have a question here, like if you're going to take Meg's monthly idea, what would be the advice for a startup that's small?
So what I did at ElasticBox is I carved out a half-day Friday. You know, hey, I'm leaving the office. And by the way, okay, see, now we all work from home. My suggestion is, because I tried this a few different ways. I tried to, hey, I'm taking a half-day Friday. I'm not going to be in the office. I'm going to be home. Didn't work for me. This is why working from home doesn't work for me either. Kids and people and I don't know. I mean, we're all multitaskers. So then you're like, oh, I should throw the laundry in while I'm doing that Zoom call. When you can, and you could probably do it now, get in your car, drive to a park and park, right? It has to be, in my mind, a different 4 walls or different environment. Environment matters. Go to a coffee, well, you know, if we could, post-COVID, go to a coffee shop. I went to a coffee shop typically. Go someplace. In fact, I'll tell you something that just happened to me recently. I have been thinking a lot about our brand and what is our core. Like I said earlier, what do you really sell?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is your company selling to your customers? And in our case, I believe, and this is, I was thinking about it, it's speed and confidence. Now, I'm sure my brand people will massage the words, but it's something along those lines. And I was on a walk on one of my half days thinking about, like, what do we really sell? Because if you don't know what your core is, like, what is your core? What creates, as my friend puts it, the gravity that creates differentiation? That is the strategic insight that needs to be in your brief for your campaigns, that needs to be in your brief for any advertising, that needs to be in your brief for your messaging. And so, like, really getting to that, and I'm still chewing on it, because actually a lot of our core is about being a bridge for enterprise companies, that you can be on-premise and in the cloud, and we enable that you can manage on-premise and in the cloud, that you can manage native apps and legacy apps. And I was telling somebody, like, we're a company of ands. We are the and company. Now, that's not going to show up in an advertisement that way, but that's what I would encourage you to think about. Like, take that time. The number one thing is, if you can distill and articulate your core, and then everything we do in marketing is about bringing customers closer to that core, right? My friend calls it proximity moves. Either you're getting closer to your customers, or you're getting them closer. And it's engineering's job to keep making that core bigger and bigger, which will create more gravitational pull. But our job is, and so identifying and articulating that. I know this is marketing 101, this is strategy 101, but I'm surprised when I ask people, what do you sell? A lot of people struggle to describe that. Anyway, that's hopefully helpful.
Listen, you have given us so much to think about. This has been actually pretty intimate. I'm going to keep tabs on you personally and professionally. You've given a lot of insight and a lot for me to think about, actually. I've been, like, thinking about a lot of things, and just everything that's happened in COVID and clarity. And I have as well worked very intentionally about over communicating. And that's sometimes very exhausting when you have customers and you have teams, and you have, constituents at large, like VMware does as well, whether they're your customers or not. You have constituents and people who weigh in onto your brand. So Carol, you are amazing. I am going to stay connected to you, because you're going to come back to Fairmont, and I'm going to drive down and pick you up, and you're going to hang out in Pittsburgh. Okay.
Well, I always have to fly through Pittsburgh, so.
Oh, well then there you go. I'll pick you up at the airport, okay, and show you the kinds of things that are happening here. You'll be blown away.
I can't wait.
And you'll be proud. You'll be proud.
I was so impressed. So, Google has a big campus there near CMU, and
we're close to them. I mean, I've known Andrew since he started it. So
awesome. Great.
Okay. There's lots of things here. So I can't thank you enough for just your wisdom, your candor, sharing your journey. You're just, it's inspirational. Not everyone is as comfortable in their candor. And, marketing is not just a standalone. I think you're right. You're an integrator. And that is what really matters. So I want to thank you all for just being with us on this intimate afternoon. And it's sunny here in Pittsburgh. It actually is. It's beautiful out. Great. Even though we have a little snow on the ground, not that much. But it's been thrilling to meet you, and wish you really good luck. I think we have some other folks that are coming up. Let's see, in my notes here on our seat, on St. Patrick's Day, we have a panel. Oh, we have a panel of people in marketing that are from a startup company called Othought. Carol, you should listen to some of these companies here: Robotics, Comcast, and what they're doing here, Schneider Downs and Niche. And they're, these are significant companies that are based here in Pittsburgh and are just, a smattering of sizes, but definitely have traction. And we're gonna work on B2B marketing the next time. So Carol, you're the best. Thank you so much. Thank you, Shelby, for making this happen. Thank you, Taylor, for being the magician behind the scenes, and thank everyone for being with us today.
Awesome. Thank you all. Take care.
Thank
Thank
you.
Stay
you.
healthy. Bye-bye.
Bye.